What is going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we have a long-awaited one. We are going to be taking a look at the Sennheiser HD560S. Now, before we get into today's review, just a little disclaimer. I actually did buy this, but I just have to give a little shout out to the Source AV. The Source AV is a audio retail shop in the Los Angeles area, and they carry a lot of brands, a lot of very high-end audio equipment. So for those of you in the Los Angeles area, you can check out their showroom. They also sell a little bit online, and they were kind enough to provide me with a little discount on this in exchange for a shout out. So once again, thanks to them for giving me a little bit of a discount on this, but I did buy this, so again, all thoughts are my own. They obviously didn't pay me or anything because I actually paid them for this. But yeah, once again, big thanks to the Source AV for giving me a little bit of a discount on purchasing this headphone. Now, the Sennheiser HD560S is, I would say, arguably the most hyped headphone release of the year. 2020 really did not have that many interesting headphone releases. But I would say the 560S probably has the biggest hype train of any of them this year that I can remember. And today we will see what I think about it. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, it's the 6XX killer. And yeah, we'll see about that. But anyway, let's go ahead and get specs out of the way. So the HD560S is coming in at $200. It is using a 120 ohm dynamic driver with a sensitivity of 110 dB a volt, a frequency response of 6 to 38,000 hertz, and a weight of 240 grams. So the 560S's build honestly feels really cheap. I wouldn't say it's completely unacceptable for $200, but it's nothing special at all. The plastic is very cheap feeling. It's just that kind of like cheap, low-end electronics plastic, if you know what I mean. Grill is metal. It has the same kind of bump and logo as like the HD660S grill, but it feels even cheaper than that. It just feels like a thinner, cheaper metal. You can feel a lot of like the sharp edges from when like this was molded, you know, like when you do a really cheap job of molding plastic, you get those like kind of sharp leftover edges. And yeah, so plastics all around, not great, very sharp molding edges. The headband cushion's nice, velour covered, very, very soft, kind of like the 2-bump, similar to the 650, but a little bit different. The pads seem like fairly standard fare for 500 series pads. A kind of nice soft velour pad, a little different from the 600 series pads, but pretty much par for the course for 500 series. Same kind of interior baffle as 500 series. They have this little bump right here in the ear cup, as most 500 series headphones do. Also, like most 500 series, you have the locking 2.5mm cable. Standard fare, they pretty much all have done this, the 598, 79, 99. They all pretty much did that. And yeah, so that's pretty much the build of the 500 series. Feels about the same as most of the other 500 series, but fairly cheap feeling overall, and I wouldn't even say is in the upper end of build for $200 headphones. Now, in terms of cables and included accessories, they come in just kind of a generic cardboard box. I mean, it does have branding on the outside, but it's the newer style Sennheiser boxes that are not particularly fancy. And then this is the cable. It comes with 10-foot cable, really janky, thin, spaghetti-like. This cable, frankly, kind of sucks. It is a 4-pole, 2.5mm, and I believe I did see a post on Headphone saying that these are internally balanced, which would make sense given the S nomenclature, because typically the S in Sennheiser nomenclature is the German word for like symmetry. I forget what the exact word is, but it's basically the German word for like symmetry, which means balanced. And historically, S Sennheisers have come with balance cables, 660S, HD800S, you know, etc. So I believe these can be wired internally balanced if you can find a 4-pole locking 2.5mm to either XLR 2.5 or 4.4, something like that. But yeah, this cable sucks. Get something to replace it. And it does come with this nice Sennheiser 1/4 inch to 3.5 adapter, which is a nice add-on. Now, as for comfort, these are fairly standard fare for 500 series. Where they excel over other 500 series is the headband padding is softer and nicer. This is more actually like the cheaper Sennheisers, like the 559 I think had similar headband padding to this. And then like the nicer ones had like the leather that wasn't as good. Clamp, they're actually surprisingly clampy. I wouldn't say they're as clampy as like a fresh 600 series, but they do have a surprising amount of clamps, and they seem like they'd be harder to unbend because there's really not much metal here to bend, unlike the 600 series where you can just bend the metal real quick and in 45 seconds you fix the clamp. But yeah, surprisingly clampy. Pads are nice, decently deep, and they're fairly comfortable to me. I wish they articulated a little bit more this way, because I feel like the pressure kind of a little bit unevenly distributes towards the top of the pad on my head at least. But all in all, I'd say they're fairly comfortable. I don't think many people have much complaints about the comfort on these. So yeah, it is decently comfortable overall. Okay, so now into the sound of the HD560S. So starting off with frequency response, the HD560S has surprisingly good extension. It is almost flat down to 20 hertz. There's a little bit of roll off there right at the very end. I'd say below like 40, maybe 30 hertz rolls off, maybe 2 or 3 dB. But other than that, pretty much dead flat bass extension, which is really surprising out of a dynamic driver, especially one at this price point. After that, your lower mids is relatively flat, all in all, pretty flat lower mid range. After that, your upper mid range is I'd say relatively in line as well. Seems, I would hate saying the word neutral, but more or less neutral. And then your treble region is also more or less neutral. These conform fairly closely to the Harman target, all in all. So it is very close to Harman signature, except for the bass shelf. It doesn't have Harman bass shelf, but other than that, fairly Harman tuning all in all, particularly in the mid-range and the treble. So it is just a very, very balanced and neutral signature all in all. I really don't have much in terms of complaints about the 560S. It is one of the best tuned headphones on the market in terms of frequency response, which is really, really surprising to me that this thing is tuned so well. So pretty much flat bass, flat mid-range, relatively inline treble. There was really nothing in the way of peaks or anything that really bothered me. I could see maybe a touch more air. I would say that's probably my only gripe in terms of frequency response, is that above 10K air I think is lacking a little bit, but other than that, really not much in the way of complaints in terms of the frequency response of this headphone. Okay, so now instead of me talking directly just about the other aspects and going through them, I think it would be better to discuss the elephant in the room and compare directly to it to go over the other aspects of the sound. So the 560S is $200, and of course we have the HD6XX at $200. So these two headphones are very, very closely priced, both Sennheisers and direct competitors. And there are a lot of people out there saying that the 560S is, the 6XX killer. And it is better in some ways, and it is not better in other ways, in my opinion. So let's go through it. So going back to frequency response real quick, areas where the 650 excels in frequency response over the 560S, mid-range warmth. So the 6XX has got that little bit of forward lower mid-range and mid-bass region that gives you more intimate lower mids. The mids on the 560S sound a little bit colder compared to the 6XX, where the 6XX is not necessarily I guess you could say neutral from a Harman standpoint, but it has a nice, pleasant warmth in the lower mids that a lot of people find desirable. 6XX also a little bit more forward in your upper mid range, which some people also find a little bit more desirable, but the 6XX is definitely more recessed in your upper treble. This is a darker headphone than the 560S is. Now, let's talk detail. Now, this is where people are going to start getting upset at me, but the 560S is not nearly as detailed as the 6XX is. The 560S sounds like a 500 series headphone in terms of technical performance. It is one of the better 500 series headphones in terms of technical performance. In fact, at least from memory, I think it might even be outdoing the HD580X. But the 560S, I would say, is pretty much the class leader of 500 series in terms of technicalities, but it still is not competing with the 6XX. Everything across the frequency range of the 6XX sounds more detailed. All your strings, much better micro details, much more resolving, much smoother, with more clarity. And then, particularly in the bass region, the 6XX bass, while it does roll off, is much more textured and more resolving. The 560S has got that standard 500 series bass that is kind of low res and a little bit muddy compared to the 6XX bass. While it does extend, it lacks a lot of texture compared to the bass on the 6XX. So it depends on what you value. If you value extension, this would maybe be better for you, but I don't think the bass quality is as good as the 6XX. Now let's talk soundstage. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the narrow soundstage on the 6XX. Personally, I don't value soundstage tremendously in headphones, which I really should make a video explaining why. But the 560S is a wider headphone than the 6XX, but I don't think it has like particularly great soundstage. I would say it's like barely average, if that. It's a little wider and it's slightly less 3 blob, but it's not particularly wide in itself. But if you really hate the narrower soundstage on the 6XX, it is a slight improvement. Now, in terms of imaging, the 560S I didn't think imaged particularly amazingly. It's less 3 blob, but the 6XX has got better layering, where, you know, it is the 6XX is, you know, 3 blob, but within those blobs it's very precise, where the 560S was a little bit more vague, despite, I would say, maybe like a little bit overall better separation of the stereo image. And then in terms of dynamics, the 560S sounds slightly overdamped compared to the 6XX, which I think is how they're getting their bass extension with some damping. Not terrible. It's decently dynamic and fairly punchy all in all. I'm not saying it sounds like dead or anything, but just you can tell it's just slightly overdamped, which is how they got their bass extension. And then in terms of timbre, I find the 6XX has got a better timbre. The 560S is slightly metallic. It's not bad. Like, this is, I would say, fairly good timbre all in all. But 6XX timbre is slightly better. And I think that will about wrap up the sound section on the 560S. Okay, so now let's go into the conclusion and my final thoughts. So the HD560S is a solid headphone. If the HD6XX never existed, this would pretty much be a class leader for its price point for a lot of people. But it is not a 6XX killer. The 6XX is absolutely worth the $20 more. If you've never used Drop before, you can get a $20 coupon, and then they're the same price. They're both $200. The 6XX is, all in all, I'd say a more technically proficient headphone. The really only area where I think it loses to the 560S is in bass extension and arguably soundstage, but I really don't think the 560S wins tremendously in that regard. 6XX, better detail, better timbre, all in all. It sounds a little bit more natural. 560S is good. It's a solid headphone, but it sounds like a 500 series headphone to me. I don't think it also has quite the detail of like the DT880 600 ohm or like the AKG K612, but it's not as analytical as both of those and is much better tuned. So there are a lot of people out there that are going to like it, and it's good, but it is not a 6XX killer. It's also probably not better than the Sundara, or it's definitely not better than the Sundara in terms of technical performance, but it's better in terms of tuning. So this is the really hard thing about this. If you're someone who either doesn't care about technical performance and only cares about frequency response, or doesn't know how to tell the difference in technical performance between headphones, this, I would say, is a really good pick for you because it is tuned really well, but the technicalities are just not up to par in terms of the 6XX. So if you live in the US, the 6XX, pretty much, I would say just take the 6XX over the 560S. If you live in Europe where 600 series, either, you know, the 600, this also applies to the HD600, HD580, 650. If you live in Europe where the 600 series headphones are significantly more expensive than this, then I would say this is a solid pickup for its price point. But in the US where this exists, this is a harder sell to me. This on sale, if it ever goes on sale for like $150 or less, solid pickup. It's the best 500 series. It's an absolute step up over the 599. But due to the 6XX existing, the 560S is a little bit harder sell. So 560S, good headphone. For US people, hard to recommend. For Europeans and people elsewhere in the world, I would say it's a fairly safe recommendation and a good headphone all in all. So US people probably get 6XX. Europeans and elsewhere, if this is significantly cheaper than the 600 series, then by all means take this. It is pretty good, and it gets my recommendation in that regard. But it is by no means a 600 series killer. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of the HD560S. Links of where to buy this in the description below, as well as my Twitter, my contact email, and all the relevant information. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed the review. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye.